It's your turn to ask some questions. And so let's start. There's a question. Pat is going to move the microphone back there. We'll just sort of move our way over, and we'll try to be really brief and get as many questions as we can. Go.
Hi, my name is Ruth. I am a renter in Oakmont, and you are talking about earthquakes and shut-off valves and stuff. So if we wanted to take care of something like this, is it up to speaking with the owner of our house, or will the Oakmont Association have information? Yes?
No, I'll speak from my perspective. You should be talking with the owner of your house to understand where your emergency shutoffs are. The Oakmont Village Association represents, what, 4,500 different people. They're probably not going to be out there taking care of your specifics. But you raise a really good point, because so many of us in Oakmont are renters. So make sure you know your emergency information that you do need to know. Good question. And there's Chuck over there. Hi, Chuck. And Steve.
This question goes to Carol Hart about parks and to our emergency responders. I wonder, during a drought season, I doubt that we have the water to maintain our parks. And I know that the city and the county have been short of water for parks that are not wildland parks. My question to all of you is, I'm concerned about getting out of Oakmont. I watched the Oakland Hills fire, and I've seen what it could do. My understanding is that a fire moves at half the wind speed. So if we got a 40-mile wind, the fire could be moving as fast as 20 miles an hour. And I'm wondering if the Greenway were not turned into a park, but were actually turned into an attachment to Highway 12. Would that make your jobs easier and make me eat better?
Carol, go ahead, and anybody else who wants to respond.
Thanks. First of all, one of the things that I'd like to remind you of is that Spring Lake is the lake itself. I'm not talking about the smaller lagoon, but the lake is a point at which choppers can come in and have to pick up water in buckets to bring to this area. And I was talking to my park manager, Bert Whitaker, and he was talking about when he's seen that done, and it's quite dramatic, but it's very good to have that large body of water right next to you, and that is used. We do not have water in the parks. We don't have water at Hood Mountain. Not that it would matter. I mean, if a fire were up at Hood, you have to fight that from the air, presumably. But we do actively manage Hood Mountain for fire. We have a fire management plan. We are quite disciplined about addressing fire risks up there. And with regard to the Greenway, perhaps you'd like to speak, but my understanding is that Caltrans has made some decisions with regard to the future of that.
We're talking about the Southeast Greenway?
Yeah, I think that was the question, right?
And Betsy, I don't know that you're familiar with the Southeast Greenway project, and that had been designated as the extension of Highway 12 going through Spring Lake Park up to, I think, Melita Road. And I just saw some communication from you about that, so why don't you help them understand what's happening with the Southeast Greenway. You understand what we're referring to? It's that strip of no man's land in Bennett Valley from approximately where Highway 12 just takes off from Home Frontage Road, extends all the way up to Spring Lake. And there was a plan for the 4-lane freeway of Highway 12 going through Bennett Valley, across Spring Lake, and connecting on the other side to ease traffic congestion. And that was pretty soundly defeated a while ago, that Santa Rosa and Bennett Valley did not want to lose Spring Lake as a recreational amenity. So it's been essentially fallow for a couple of decades, but there's some action going forward. So Betsy, bring us up to speed.
Yeah, you're correct, Supervisor Gorin. Back in 1950s, there was a plan for Caltrans to extend the Highway 12 from the Farmers Lane going through the Spring Lake and connect at the Melita Road. And the thought process behind that was to bypass the downtown area and get to the Sonoma 12 faster. This was back a few decades ago, and Caltrans went ahead and purchased some properties for this purpose, and it was designated for the freeway expansion. Now later in the years, there was not a whole lot of support from the city of Santa Rosa as well as the county, mostly because of the environmental issues around that area. And since the Caltrans does not have the support of the local agencies, lately we have taken another look at it, and what we are trying to do is to resign that portion of that freeway expansion. And back in last month or so, when we have to resign the freeway expansion, Caltrans have to go back to California Transportation Commission, who authorizes freeway expansion or take it away. So right now, there is a notice of intent to resign this portion of the expansion, and there is a right now there is a what is called a public circulation period for 30 days. It ends in July 23rd. It has been notified in various newspapers, and comments are welcomed at this point till July 23rd. And what Caltrans will do is, compile all the comments and go back to California Transportation Commission in the August California Transportation Commission meeting for the final approval to resign the freeway expansion. And once the freeway is resigned for this section, those parcels which have been purchased by Caltrans will be declared excess land and will be disposed of. So that's where we stand right now.
And there is a very active coalition of neighborhood groups, city groups, elected officials really working on the future of the Southeast Greenway. And I know I paid attention to that as mayor, but we were a little preoccupied propping up the budget at the time. So they are moving forward on that, and there might be some very interesting things happening in that area in the near future. But Betsy, help me understand, because I was just talking to a constituent from Sonoma who reminded me that there had been a plan some decades ago about creating a 4-lane Highway 12 through the length of the Valley of the Moon. And I don't know whether that predates your service, but I suspect that there are many people in Sonoma Valley not especially happy about the prospect of having a 4-lane divided highway coming through here and losing all of the trees and creating just more of what eastern Santa Rosa is. Do you have any knowledge about how that was effectively killed, for lack of a better word?
I do not have a knowledge about that particular project. I probably have to get back to you on that.
Well, I know from my experience that that was a plan some decades ago, and I think perhaps we've moved beyond that, but maybe after we all have left this earth, maybe our children will be dealing with that, or maybe not. Yes, Carol.
I want to mention that Regional Parks has received a grant, thank you very much, from Caltrans, to examine the feasibility of a bike trail from Melita Road to essentially Sonoma Valley Regional Park, connecting with trails into Sonoma. So we are in that process. We will be having public hearings There are areas that are the water agency, for example, already owns that will make that trail a little easier, and then it will get a little more difficult as we get into the private land. But we are in the middle of that process. I would refer you to our website, Sonoma County Parks. Just put that into your search, and you can look under our planning section and have a full description of where that project and all our other projects stand.
So, good news for Sonoma Valley. Next question. I'm seeing, okay, so why don't we, who has the microphone? Okay, why don't we come into the front of the row, and then we'll move our way back. Thank you, Evelyn.
First, thank you, all of you, for attending and helping us this evening. I realize that I'm comforted by all of the preparations that you've made. However, my very biggest concern is this, that with all that you have done, you know, there's a saying that you can't get there from here. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, now, we have gridlock on Highway 12. And as time goes on, and not very long off, El Noca will be developed, as will our meadows, adding another, well, it will have over 5,000 people in this concentrated area, particularly between Pythian and Melita Road. Is there any possibility, and I address this to Ms. Joseph, that we widen this area to prevent this funnel effect of traffic, that the bottleneck truly is at this point between those two streets, or roads, if you will. And I think that we are at risk and we are in danger, because were there to be a fire, we are absolutely, you know, in a deadlock situation of moving people and equipment anywhere because there's nowhere to go.
Okay, thank you for that question. Apparently, Caltrans have reviewed the average daily traffic going through this corridor. And right now, what our studies have shown is the traffic is at capacity with what we have right now there, which is 2-lane highway. Keep in mind, this route is designated as a scenic highway, and there are a lot of trees adjacent to that corridor. Any widening of the highway to add capacity would require a higher environmental document, which we call the environmental impact report, with a lot of environmental issues, and that's something will generate in the future. It will be a lot of issues when we go through that environmental process. So currently, Caltrans is not planning to add capacity to the highway unless there is a need which is being generated from the county for the land use development. What that means is that if there are adjoining development in the land use which would impact the highway operations, then county typically sends the environmental document and the plans to Caltrans, and Caltrans will assess the impact to the highway and see if there is a need to increase the lanes or add left lanes in order to make sure that it has a safe operation. So we typically make sure that it's done safely. Any improvements or any land use developments is done safely, and we work with the cities and the counties to mitigate or minimize any environmental impacts or any traffic operation impacts to it. Other than that, Caltrans does not have any current plans to widen the lanes, primarily because it's designated as a scenic highway and due to the significant impacts to the environment.
And Captain Childs, you and I had a conversation earlier before the meeting started, and I'd like your perspective of what you're finding as the California Highway Patrol, specifically in this section of State Highway 12 from Pythian Road to where it widens out in Santa Rosa. Because we've had, just in my tenure, we had one development passing through us, and there had been 2 wineries permitted, now El Noga Village. So we do have some concern about capacity. And so describe to us, first of all, what you're seeing on that section of highway specifically. And then you might broaden the conversation, because we're really concerned that if we have congestion now and we have emergency, how do you create more capacity on a road?
So those are interesting questions, to be sure. First of all, what we're noticing in this upper end of the Valley of the Moon is exactly what you talked about. During commute hours, it is very, very heavy. And you're watching more and more people build homes in this valley. You're watching more development happen in this valley. And unfortunately, I don't believe that as a law enforcement agency we have the ability to tell one person or the next, well, you were here first and you have access to the right-of-way or the roadway over someone else. So in terms of traffic congestion, there's 2 kinds. There's incident-driven, and then there's recurring traffic congestion. I think what you're talking about is recurring. Now, to address the issue of a major incident and needing to evacuate this upper end of the valley, it's really going to be incident-specific. If the fire is moving to the south, we're going to need to evacuate everyone to the north. And if it's at the north, we're going to need to evacuate people to the south. And if that's to happen, I feel very confident that we would have the resources in conjunction with the Santa Rosa Police Department and the Santa Rosa Sheriff's Department to effectively open the bottleneck. It's kind of like having a funnel with a valve at the end. And in this case, if you're traveling north out of the valley, what is the valve? It's the traffic lights as you're entering the city of Santa Rosa that tend to slow everything down. And if we really needed to move a lot of people, we would be working collaboratively with our allied agency partners to open up that valve and get people out of here. So I imagine that's what you're looking for, and if it's not, I'm happy to expound.
Jason, do you have any other comments there?
Yeah, from the development standpoint, both the city and county do evaluate the developments as they come forward. We require traffic impact studies be done. Those are shared with Caltrans. Caltrans has a development unit that specifically evaluates those proposals as they come forward. They share those with all of their different branches, and that's also true with each of the local agencies. Now, most of the development does occur within the city limits, and the city of Santa Rosa has been very good about sharing those developments with the county, and we do our best to try to collaborate to make sure that the impacts specific to that development are addressed as a part of that development. Now, the next step, if we decide that there's a potential for us to be able to move forward with the project, we would go up to the Sonoma County Transportation Authority. They own, or they're responsible for the quarter-cent sales tax relating to Measure M, if you recall back in 2004, and that was particularly relating to help redo Highway 101. There wasn't a whole lot of the act rate highways that were included in there from a congestion management standpoint, but looking forward in the future, there may be the opportunity, if there are locations where we have substantial congestion issues, that we can work with the Sonoma County Transportation Authority to try to address a couple of those. The good and the bad of having a scenic highway designation is, the good is it allows us to keep some of the development types from occurring directly adjacent to the roadway. It allows us to make it a scenic corridor. The bad is it sort of forces us to keep it as a scenic corridor. And so when we talk about expansion, the concept of removing those trees, now I know there's the emotional, there's the environmental, but then there's also this component of regulatory that we've put upon ourselves. And it does make it very challenging to undo some of those things that we've incorporated into in the past for what we thought was our benefit. So, you know, I've heard this a couple of different times through phone calls and through emails. I certainly know that this portion of Highway 12 is very congested, especially in the peak hour. And it's something we will be working with Caltrans and the SETA on moving forward in the future to see if there's anything we can do to help address some of those issues.
Thanks, Jason, and I'm so glad that you are here, Ms. Joseph, because that was one of the messages that we might be working with you on in the future. There was a somewhat controversial development or a permitting of a new kennel or an expansion of a kennel that generated so many constituent concerns about the amount of congestion we already have on that stretch and the lack of visual safety and projection. So it was the board's suggestion that we start working with Caltrans and TPW to identify perhaps what we could be doing with that stretch, because we know we've had a number of accidents on that stretch. So I'm very, very familiar with the challenges that we've had, and CHP is as well. Another question, and we need, okay, go ahead.
My wife and I live in Starry Knoll, which is up pretty close to Annandale. There are two things I'd like to see done that I think would improve our safety, and they're fairly inexpensive. I'd like to see a fire siren installed in the center of Oakmont to alert us all that Annandale's on fire and that we're in big trouble. Secondly, in 1997, just before we moved here, there were 33 miles of roads, fire roads in 5,000 square mile in Annandale Park. And in 1999, they closed the majority of them. Today, if there's a fire, the firemen have to hike in maybe a mile and a half to get to that fire. By that time, the fire is spread. Well, aircraft are fine to put these out, but what if the aircraft is in Lake County, or what if the helicopter's down for repair? I'd feel better if we opened a lot more fire roads using a backhoe. It shouldn't cost a lot of money to get those boulders out of the way. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure whether Cassie is still here, but I think the fire siren in the middle of Oakmont, it might be something that you might work with the Santa Rosa Fire Department and the Oakmont Village Association to have a conversation about that. We tried to answer your question about the fire roads, but can we briefly go over that? It looks to me, as I hike down some of those roads, that emergency equipment could pretty easily access those roads once again. They're not permanently closed off. Am I wrong? Can you get trucks up there?
It varies. Some of them were recontoured, but probably a little widening during an event would provide the access. But like I said, we have a wildfire management plan that includes access for the fire agencies. It addresses those issues, and I'm sure that state parks and the local fire agencies and CAL FIRE will sit down and look at that wildfire management plan and see if the fire agencies feel that they have sufficient access. Those roads have been closed for many years, so there would be an environmental review process to reopen them, but it's really a discussion with the fire agencies as part of that wildfire management planning.
And from the CAL FIRE's perspective, we know that you have access to bulldozers because we've seen them in incidents of wildfires. Do you bring in a bulldozer and just clear out what you need to do in order to get access? No, I think that's the one that's not working.
Yes, we have the ability to do that with our bulldozers, but those decisions are made, they're situational. It depends on the type of fuel the fire is in, the rate of spread. We could also take different tactics and strategies where we can use different topographical features and different fuel beds to bring the fire out to an area that's easier to control without doing as much or potentially as much environmental damage. However, there's always a concern with access fire side, and that's parks, and we'll work with parks and Santa Rosa Fire, because there's a need for medical services as well. But we're already in contact with state parks, and we're going to review that plan, and perhaps there may be a suggestion for increased access, but there's more than one option.
And I also want to say that we've been working with Chief Terrell. The board has been pretty demanding that we reinstitute the chipper program. And if you were around a few years ago, you know that The county offered services for homeowners who were clearing or pruning up to create defensible space around your house. If you call the county service, they'll come over and chip it up and leave it on your property. So we know in the 1st District that we have an incredible fuel load, and people have reminded us about the number of dead and dying trees, particularly on the other side of the valley. So we will be working with perhaps the Oakmont Village Association and the individual fire districts through the valley to work with homeowners to create that defensible space. And if you haven't heard of that term, you really need to hear about it. And you can create, raise the limbs up from the ground, clear the trees away and the high vegetation away from the houses, and that's really will be your best protection for your personal property and your homes, other than, of course, evacuating when someone tells you to evacuate. Another question? Yes, over there.
Hi, my name is Marlene, and I know that it takes a lot of time with mitigation and all the impact reports and the reports that you've been doing. I've only lived here for a year, and I respect the forest and everything else. And I too believe that a 2-lane highway, after the horrific accident on a Saturday, you have tourists, it's seasonal, fire season is seasonal. How are you going to really get in here or have us get out, even if it's through your computer programs, wherever it lights up and says, we want to be able to feel safe. And I just feel that it's the same rhetoric wherever we live, that it's going to take another impact report. This is 20 years ago that you said you closed down, you know, access, fire roads, whatever, that I've been listening to. And why isn't mitigation going on now, since we've had the drought for the entire year, to make it better for your safety as firefighters and for our safety for living here, when you've approved an increase of all these new homes and apartments, and Annandale housing has increased on Melita Road. And, you know, that's the real crux of what I came here for safety and for really taking a proactive stance in getting things moved forward.
Thank you very much for your comment, and we appreciate, perhaps afterwards, I can have a conversation with you. Please come up and we can have that dialogue. Next question. Someone put a microphone in someone's hand.
Yeah, my name is Jack Eldridge. When there's a bottleneck, a known bottleneck in a community for evacuation, and that potential is on the scene, it's not unusual for emergency services, law enforcement, fire, traffic engineering to get together and actual model evacuations to see what you would shut down to get people out, what do you keep open to get the firemen in, how long would it take to evacuate this area, so when you make that decision, you have some idea what the time frame is. Has anybody done that modeling? Is anybody planning to do that modeling?
And who might, have we done any modeling about the time it would take to evacuate Oakmont? No, we haven't done that. But I think I heard pretty clearly that first of all, you should prepare to be on your own for 72 hours in case it's an earthquake, because water supplies might be disrupted, and know where your emergency shutoffs are. Then I heard from them, if there is a fire or another emergency response, and you do find that the roads are congested, look for the defensible space. And they're recommending that you take your emergency supplies and your pets, head to the golf course, because that's the last place to burn up. If you, like me, live up on the hill, I'm going to be checking that smoke, I'm going to be packing my car, and I'm going to go to the golf course. And so I have confidence that our emergency responders will be on the scene, will be directing traffic, will be having the flashing lights going, shooting us through. I think the congestion on Highway 12 is the least of my concerns. I want to make sure that my family is safe, my neighbors are safe, and let the professionals do their job. Next question. Someone? Anyone?
Yeah, I'd like to state at the beginning of 6:30, as my preface to the question, is that it interferes with our cocktail hour.
Where's my wine?
But notwithstanding, my question is there any thought with respect to those old oak trees on Highway 12 coming down and causing a horrendous accident?
That's a good question, and when I was elected supervisor, Pat and I worked on a couple of the oak trees across from Oakmont because they were precarious, and you may not have noticed, but they came down. So any other responses? Who actually looks at our trees lining Highway 12? How do we know if they're dangerous?
I'm Jim. I'm the local maintenance area supervisor for the greater Santa Rosa area. Those trees all go through an annual inspection by our tree crew supervisor. So we're constantly keeping an eye on those trees, but anytime you folks might see something, like we say, you're our eyes also out there. We're understaffed. We do a good as job as we can out there. And we take traffic safety and fire safety is very important to us as, you know, state of California in general. Currently, we've been out here the last 2 weeks mitigating any fire risks or dangers, starting at the Melita and 12 area, working our way east. We just completed that today, and we got up to just east of Pythian. So if you notice, we've mowed all the grasses from the edge of the roadway up to the Oakmont right-of-way, and mitigated the weeds and brush down from, say, the Ledson Winery to Pythian Road. But anyway, the answer to your question is those trees are evaluated annually.
Thank you so much for your service. Really appreciate that. And we're seeing our high, tall grass everywhere, and we're so grateful for Caltrans and other folks who cut down that high grass. And I know that this gentleman in the green right here has a question. So Pat, after that question, no, that's okay. Go ahead and ask a question.
I'm going to give the mic to Herm after I ask my question.
Okay, great.
Question first. Maybe you're going to answer. He's a co-leader in my group, and what I want to talk about is communication. You all have done a fantastic job of telling us how wonderful your communications is with each other. What the people in this room are concerned about is how this information gets to us. In the case of an emergency, the Oakmont Emergency Preparedness Committee mobilizes, and there's a team of people in this room that consists of a medical team that are triaging people and getting them out, as well as a communications team, and they are communicating with people like me out in the neighborhood with a radio. I'm in communication with people like Herm, who are in turn in communication with their neighbors. So if there's an emergency, this radio traffic goes back and forth, plus we get information coming from the central communications in here. What I want to know and what people want to know is how the group here communicates with you all and through whom to pass information along to us, especially in the case of an evacuation.
That is a great question, and I thank all of you for being part of the solution. Before you ask your question or answer...
I'm not going to ask it because he asked it.
All right, great, I love it. So how many up here knew how organized Oakmont was and knew who to connect with? Do you have a name and a phone number to get connected with them?
Uh-oh.
Hello?
Yes.
All right, so the COPE leaders know that every fire station in Santa Rosa has a ham radio operator, and they're going to be the ones that primarily send the information. If the landlines aren't working, the cell phones aren't working, and there is no fire person with a radio,
very rarely will it be somebody assigned to this building in the very early stages of an emergency. So that COPE ham radio operator at Station 7 will be issuing information that they need to, and they will get that to us, the fire department, and then we will respond as we need to. If there's a fire, we're going to be dealing with the fire. There's not a whole lot of information you need to know other than if your house is by the fire, don't stay in your house, get in your car, evacuate, come to this building, go to Sonoma, go to Santa Rosa, go to a friend's house that's somewhere else in Oakmont, and let us get in there and do our thing, and then we will get as much information as quickly as we can to you. But in terms of the earthquake and the COPE and the big wildfire, that's where the ham radio operator at Station 7 will be your direct connect to this organization or this community. That makes sense?
Or bring your golf clubs and go shelter on the golf course. I'm just kidding there, folks. Sorry. Okay, another question. A lady in red. Okay, back there, and then the lady in red, and then we'll come up. Stephanie. Go ahead, ask your question.
Are we set up for the reverse 911?
Okay, wait. We'll get you.
I was asking, are we in Santa Rosa set up for the 911 reverse calls? Our kids got them in San Diego, not this fire, but the fire before that or the one before that.
Right.
Thank you.
It's called the 10 system, and the county is set up for that. There's going to be an update or an upgrade in the next month or two. But the county has the ability. We would put the request into Redcom. Redcom would contact the Sonoma County Sheriff's Dispatch, and they have the ability to make those reverse 911 calls.
Could you explain what that is?
It's a computer program that basically, the way I understand it, there's on the computer you can pick a region or a geographic of the city or the county, highlight that whole area, type in a message, hit go, it dials every phone number in that house area. I don't know if it's cell phone. I think the new portion will have cell phones as well. But there's a lot. It just automatically phones and says you have an emergency or whatever it is in your area. Please go to this area. Please do this. This is just information only. But if again, this is not going to happen immediately because we're all coming here to figure out what's going on. So I kind of feel like everyone here thinks that if a fire happens in the backyard, that Oakmont is going to be in trouble. And to me, I hope you really don't feel that way. That could happen. That is a complete truth. There could be issues. But for the most part, I think we're kind of overthinking this. I think we need to be prepared. I understand there's traffic issues, so how do we prepare for that if it happens at 5 o'clock? You know, like the captain said, they're going to open up that valve and we're going to get people out and we're going to get people in as best as we can. Everyone needs patience, including us, so we can get in and do our job. But just because we've had fires back here every year, and we've done a very good job of sustaining those fires, putting them out. You know, I've heard Oakland Hills mentioned a couple of times. Oakland Hills, while it can happen almost anywhere, it is such a small sliver of what does happen. That's what we focus on. Oakland Hills had poor water supply, skinny roads, brush right up to houses. It was a different animal. On top of it, had 50, 60, 70 mile-an-hour winds. We typically don't get that here a whole lot. Do we get high winds? We do. The best thing you can do is prepare your property with defensible space, and then when a fire does happen, you have done all you can do from that perspective. And then we're going to come in and do what we can to make sure it stays out of every home. I can't guarantee that, but that's what we're geared for. That's what we're here for, and that's what we're going to do. So I don't want to minimize it, but I feel like we're kind of making it a lot bigger than we're focusing on the real big fire. And while it can happen, I think that's the exception, not the rule.
Thank you. Another question. And we're over our time limit, and I really apologize, but these are great questions, and I want to make sure you get the information that you want.
I'm a COPE team leader over in Twin Lakes. And first, I want to thank everyone here for being here this evening. I've learned a lot, and I want to take that information back to the people in my neighborhood. Secondly, I haven't heard an issue about it this evening. If we have either fire, earthquake, or other issues coming up, a lot of people are not going to be able to get to the hospital or the doctor or emergency services coming here. I think there's a need to have some type of permanent medical facility here, urgent care clinic or something that's already in place as a staff. So if we have a situation like this, we can be proactive. And I'll open up to anyone who might be able to answer that.
Do we have mobile medical response? Somebody who might come out here to help us with any medical issues?
What would happen, I can't tell you we're going to put a clinic out here because that's, you know, but if there's an emergency, what we would do is set up an area where we would triage people, get them the most critical patients, we would get them out. We would deal with the people we could here. You got to remember, if there's an earthquake in Santa Rosa, Oakmont is one spot in Santa Rosa, and it's probably going to be much better off than everything in the city. So those hospitals are going to be impacted, seeing as how most of them are built on faults or near faults, right? And I can't help that either. But what we can do is if, like I said, I can't promise a clinic, but we'll get emergency people out here, ambulances, and if it warrants that we need to get some sort of mobile team, we have access through the county, through the state, to bring those types of resources in. Now, will that happen within 5 hours? No. It's going to take probably days, 1, 2, 3, 5 days, to get that really functioning where it should be functioning. But there's a lot of things we can do in between that time to make sure people get the care that they need and the attention that they need.
And please remember also that we have so many of our emergency responders who are trained emergency medical technicians, paramedics, and they come with the engine. So we know that you all have great skills and emergency medical responses, and so we don't need necessarily a clinic here to know that we are going to be well taken care of. But Tony is absolutely right. If there is a major earthquake, they're going to be here, but Santa Rosa is a very large city, and Sonoma County is a very large city. So we need to be equipped to be on our own for a while. We're going to take one more question, and then we're going to quit for they're right up here. And I bet these folks will stay up here to answer your questions after we adjourn.
Thank you, Supervisor Gorin. Thank you all for coming here. It's been very good to hear from you, see faces and personalities, and hear about your organization. I have 3 basic questions. First and foremost, in anyone's memory or reading of history here, when is the last widespread emergency that affected our community here?
And why don't you ask your 3 questions, and then we'll get all
the second is, it is evident to me that there's not a great awareness of asking the basic questions. What are the most likely emergencies to occur that would affect a large number of homes in the community? And thirdly, have any of you been brought together in a coordinated consulting, counseling, sharing of information, and figuring out what to do in cases of widespread emergency? By the way, I'm the president of the adjoining or adjacent association, the Villages at Wild Oak, about 100 yards due south of here. We're landlocked between Oakmont and Annandale State Park. I'm sorry I've screwed this up. And I'm here with my wife, Stephanie Botanides Lavinia, who has created the Emergency Preparedness Committee for our community along the lines of ODA's COPE. And she has brought out the regional or the area field captain of CAL FIRE, who has told us that the likelihood of a fire sweeping down from the hills here is unlikely because prevailing winds are in the opposite direction. That relieved us greatly of a great deal of anxiety here. And so a forest fire coming down with the Oakland variety is not likely to happen here. I don't know if that is shared by all of you. In addition to which, we have an agreement, our community and yours, to access through Channel Drive, through our community to Channel Drive in the case of emergency. You should be aware of that. Thank you, and I appreciate your answers to your question.
Thanks, Joe. And I think we will have some concluding remarks from all of the speakers here, and perhaps you could answer some of Joe's questions as you finish up with your remarks. Tony, why don't we start with you?
We work closely with all fire agencies, whether Snohomish County, CAL FIRE, other fire districts. It's not just Oakmont, it's throughout the county. We're surrounded by Rincon Valley, 3/4 of the city. We got Kenwood on one side, we got CAL FIRE inside the city. So we work closely with everyone. If we have a large emergency, the last one that comes to mind was 1964, the Hanley Fire, which burned towards Sutter Hospital. That was 1964. 1969, we had a pretty good earthquake. Short of that, I can't really think of anything. Maybe somebody else can, but we work closely with the county. If we have to open up our emergency operations center in the city, the county will open up theirs because that gives us the equipment through state, region-wide type resourcing, and whatever we ask for, we get when it's that type of emergency. It doesn't happen overnight, but it gets on the road and it comes. So we work closely with law enforcement. We work closely with the Parks Department. Whenever there's an emergency, you will find us in a unified command, which means if it's in Santa Rosa and we got CAL FIRE in the county there, there's going to be 3 chief officers that are in unified command no matter what jurisdiction is in, because we got all of our equipment there. I hope that answers some of your question. And as far as the prevailing wind, and like I said earlier, a large fire impacting all of Oakmont is the exception, not the rule. So that goes in line with the prevailing winds that are exactly what you heard. They typically go the other way. Now when they're blowing downhill and they're hot, that's a problem. To me, that happens 2-3 weeks out of the year. And you would know that more here because you guys live here. But where I live, I know when it's coming out of the north and northeast and it's blowing hard, I know something's different. But that's where I live. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Durham.
And Chief Gosner, thank you so much for being here, especially all the other folks from Santa Rosa and Rincon Valley. On behalf of Oakmont, we really want to thank you. You are here daily, sometimes a lot of times each day in an emergency response capacity, not necessarily for wildfire, thank you very much, but we do appreciate all the services that you provide to Oakmont. Thank you.
One other thing, whenever there is a large emergency, this really is a shared responsibility between police, fire, the residents, the communities as a whole. Please don't think that when a big emergency happens that everything's going to be taken care of by somebody else. So when I say it's a shared responsibility, please have that plan. Please know how you're going to react. Please know who you're going to contact to let them know you're okay. Please know how you're going to contact somebody if you need help. And that's how, together as a community, we get through this. Right?
And also make sure that your families know what your response will be. They're going to worry about you. And so you should be discussing, if something happens in Oakmont, I'm going to be heading this direction. You may not be able to contact me, but we'll figure out how to make that connection. So talk about it with them. Chief Durham.
Well, first of all, to answer part of your questions, the larger scale fires that have been in the area that I'm aware of, I cannot think of one that has actually impacted Oakmont specifically. There's been fires nearby, the Cavevale fire in the 90s, there was another fire in Annandale Park back in the 90s, and then in the 60s, the fire that Chief Gosner spoke of, and then fires in Nuns Canyon and in the Cavevale area. You're very lucky here in Oakmont because your streets are wide. You have a sound development. You're here today with us, and we're citizens here in the county as well. We're concerned for our families. But what's exciting about your question about working together, absolutely. We work together on a regular basis. Some of us right here, we have weekly or monthly breakfast meetings. We work day in and day out. Not just because of our jobs, but because we live and we care about the communities that we work and live in. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chief Terrell, welcome to Sonoma County. We love our emergency responders, and your concluding thoughts.
Thank you. These two gentlemen before me, they really summed it up, and I really like those. They drove it home, but I'll add on. We do really work well together. The connection that the county brings, so we're connected immediately with the state, which enables us to bring unlimited resources to any significant event that occurs. So that's it. You should rest assured that we'll be able to get to it in time. It might take 3 days, it might take a day, but we'll get there and we'll get the resources that are needed to mitigate almost any problem that's presented. Thank you.
And Ms. Joseph from Caltrans, thank you so much for being here. And we know that your job is not easy and you have a lot of responsibilities, but we appreciate your team members' participation tonight and your concluding remarks.
Well, thank you again for giving us the opportunity to come here and talk about Caltrans' role on this stretch of the highway. We do really appreciate to hear the concerns directly from the community so that we can take back. Especially we heard about the recurring condition in front of that Oakmont Drive, that stretch, and the possibility of expanding that highway. And we will work very closely with the county and also the Transportation Authority, which is the SCTA, and try to evaluate and see what are the possibilities of expanding that highway along that stretch. And thanks to our maintenance group who participated in here, and we will try to maintain as much as possible the state facilities and try to keep it in a good shape. And also thanks to our traffic expert who also have a lot of knowledge, but there was not a really specific question, but thanks for Philip also for joining me. Thank you.
And Captain Childs, thank you so much for being here. We may not have an opportunity to see you again. You will be replaced in the Santa Rosa area, but again, I want to thank you for your responsiveness. I bet a lot of these folks go down to Kenwood. So your final comments.
Concluding remarks for me would be an appreciation to the community for showing your support of what we do to try to serve you and work together. I'm hoping that my CHP officers out on the beat don't completely focus on Supervisor Gorin, but take care of everybody. So thanks again.
Thank you. And Jason, we're glad to have you working with the county, but it is wonderful that you have a knowledge of Oakmont and the city. So your final thoughts?
Yeah, I want to let you know that my job is to coordinate with all of these folks. We'll be working closely with regional parks as they start developing their integral pathway network that they're proposing throughout the county. That also goes through with state parks. CHP is our close partner as we start doing and making sure that people are safe on the roadways. Obviously, we're working with Caltrans in just about every role we can, whether it's our maintenance departments working closely together, whether I'm working and collaborating with either project development or traffic operations. I will make a pitch for the city of Santa Rosa. I have a high level of respect for their public works staff, not only from the maintenance team there, but also from their traffic engineering and public works department. So you've got a very good crew that takes care of you within the city limits, as well as I think very highly of our own staff at the county. And so, thanks for having us out here, and we're available to help you further as you start having additional questions in the future.
And Cindy Schaefer from State Parks, it is such a pleasure to work with you and Danita and the great crew that you brought with you. Thank you for doing what you do, and we are your neighbors here. So your final thoughts, you're going to take good care of us, right?
Yes, of course. I just want to say how heartening it is to see such a large turnout, to have a community that is so engaged. You don't see that everywhere. So I personally appreciate that. State Parks is very happy to be to work with all of these agencies, and Sonoma County Regional Parks helping to keep the park open when it was threatened with closure. Incredibly appreciative of that. And I'm in Annandale quite a bit, so when you guys are in the park, all of you that raised your hands, if you see me, please stop and say hi and introduce yourself.
And they have been very responsive to me. I reported a downed tree from the Lawndale Trail, and pretty quickly it was taken care of. So if you do see something happening in the parks, let me know, let them know, and they will get on it. Carol.
Thank you so much, Supervisor. I just want to say thank you also on behalf of Sonoma County Regional Parks. And I would like to say that even though here tonight we've been focused on a major event, there are minor events that happen on a regular basis in the parks. And those minor events generally involve people having bike accidents or other incidents, similar incidents, where people need help in the park. And so we always coordinate. We set up a command center if it's a incident involving, for example, someone lost in the park. We are coordinating all the time. We have a lot of practice working together, I can assure you. And we know what to do, and we know who to call, when to call them. Our rangers are very close, state parks and regional parks with CAL FIRE and others. So I want to assure you that we are coordinated, we are practiced, we're working together, and look forward to coordinating more closely with all of you. Thank you.
I wanted to thank all of our panelists and all of our great folks who are here working to defend us. We've talked a lot about emergency preparedness, and that's exactly what we are geared to do. But across the nation, we are now focusing on resiliency. How can we be resilient as a community, not only economically, but working through major, working through major disasters. And it starts with us, and it really starts with you, as you have demonstrated already through the COPE program and your emergency response. Thank you so much for what you do. And I just want to conclude by talking about a wonderful phrase that start where you are with what you have. Work with what you have in new ways, and do what you can do so that you can diversify within the system model. We've talked about the system model here, and it really is up to all of us to think about what their jobs are and how we can better prepare ourselves as neighborhoods, as neighbors, and as community to achieve the resilience that we need to achieve. Thank you so much for everything that you do. Good night.